Hey, everybody, welcome to another week of the Good Word. I'm so glad you could join us. Today is Wednesday, September 15th, and this past weekend was September 11th. We passed the 20th anniversary of the horrific tragedy of terrorism of September 11th. We didn't mention it much in church, so I thought I'd reflect on it a little bit today. People often ask, where were you when you first heard of the towers coming down? And you know where I was? I was right here, sitting in this chair. We were having a small staff meeting. Linda Cole, our secretary, Marge Woodward, who was our Christian education director at the time, having our usual Tuesday morning staff meeting. It was a beautiful day. I had walked my daughter Katie over to the preschool because she was in preschool at the time. My wife was at home. My son Tim was off at Davis Hill. And our nursery school director at the time, Barbara Lorge, knocked on the door and she said, "I hate to interrupt you." And then she said, "No, I don't hate to interrupt you. You need to know this. A plane has just flown into the World Trade Center." We're like, "What?" And I had a little TV that was sitting here, and we had tuned it in and kind of watched. And I called my wife to let her know. And then the second plane entered in, and we were just all in shock, like so many of you were who remember that day well. And it was a really difficult time. And it was very horrific that 3,000 people had died, but it was more than that. And it was very shocking that these high rises could come crashing down so easily. But it was more than that too. I think what happened on that day was trust was broken. People don't do stuff like that. You just don't take a plane and fly it into a high rise or things like that. That troubled me more than anything. It made me realize how much we live in a culture where we trust other people. It's based on trust, and people don't drive their car off the road and hit people. People, even who are angry people, don't usually do horrific things. You think they could more, but we trust people in general. Even people that are having bad moods and are grumpy, self-centered people usually stay within certain bounds. And on that day, a boundary was crossed, a huge boundary, and trust was broken. And we became afraid. And by the way, it wasn't just the Twin Towers, right? It was the Pentagon and then the other plane that crashed in a field because passengers on the plane brought it down, heroes. So much trust was broken, and we were in so much fear. I remember those days. I bet you many of you do too. There's been a lot of parallels between this past year and September 11th. The uncertainty, the fear of the virus, the deaths. We've lost 100, 200 times as many people to COVID as we lost in September 11th. But there's just something so shocking about that day. And one of the things I think about all the time when I think of September 11th is, why did the nations rage? Why do we fight against each other? Why do we hate each other? Why do we do such horrific things to each other? Well, part of it's because our world is broken and our world is fallen. And I think of Jesus' words whenever there's disruption, when the nations are in shock and awe because of war or because of terrorism, when we're shut down and just fearful because of COVID and quarantined and all that stuff. I think of Jesus' words and the end times and his warnings to us. Last week, I was speaking to you on the latter parts of Matthew 24, but earlier, Jesus in Matthew 24 and 25, Jesus talks about the end times, and he says, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still near. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There'll be famines and earthquakes in various places. All of these are the beginning of birth pains." So I think of nation rising against nation and wars. I think of September 11th. And again, it's so shocking to us. Things don't happen like that in American soil, but there's wars all over the place, and the wars we've been in. And when I think of COVID-19, it falls more into that category of earthquakes and natural disasters and those kind of things. And Jesus says, don't be alarmed when you see these things. The beginning of birth pains, the end is coming. This world is broken, this world is dysfunctional, and it's coming to an end. And there will be a day when there will be no more war, when our swords will be turned into plowshares, when there will be peace on earth because Jesus will come and bring in that kingdom of peace we've been longing for. There will be a day when there will be no more dysfunction in the natural order, no more disease, no more COVID, no more cancer, no more heart disease, no more bodies that break down and decay and die. There will come a day when all of this dysfunctional world and order will come to an end. And until then, my friends, we have to endure. Jesus says, don't let this stuff shock you. It does shock us, but don't be overly shocked. Know that Jesus has said these things will happen, and probably more things like this are going to happen. I hate to be the bearer of good news, but they probably will. And Jesus says, don't let it overly unsettle you or be alarmed, because this is all part of God's plan. The birth pains of the end of this order and the beginning of the new order, the reign of God's kingdom, which is our hope and our destiny. You know, the verse that was my go-to verse during September 11th, which is still a great verse when we think of all the unrest in our world. I was thinking just yesterday, North Korea launching more missiles, trying to get their nuclear program up and running so they can strike fear into the rest of us. We used to worry a lot about nuclear war. We don't think much about it, but it still could be the end of the world. There's so many things that are troubling and unsettling in our world. Jesus says, don't be overly alarmed. And when the nations seem to teeter and totter and life seems chaotic, and it could be in these grand ways for you, it could be the fear of terrorism, the fear of domestic terrorism, the unrest and division, the mistrust not only of others, but the mistrust in our government and of one another. It's all out there. It could be these big things. It could be the virus, or it could be little things in your life that are just unsettling you, that just are bringing you down and holding you captive. I love this passage. It applies to it all. Psalm 46, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. Though the earth give way, and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, and the mountains quake in their surging. There is a river, whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at the break of day. Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice, the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. I love that passage. I find such strength and comfort. Yes, the nations teeter and fall. The kingdoms are in an uproar. We fight against each other. We enjoy moments of peace. We're at relative peace now in the United States. We have a good life here. But it's so unstable. It's so uncertain. And when I think of the mountains falling into the heart of the sea, I always think of those towers coming down and the fear that struck in me. And even though these things happen, God is still our refuge and our strength, a very present help in times of trouble. Yes, our hope and our destiny is in what's to come, that reign of peace, that kingdom of peace, that day when all will be made well. But here in the present moment, in the midst of the chaos, in the midst of the disorder, in the midst of all the fears we may have, God is an ever-present help to you, to me, to us, and to our world. He has it in his hands. There's nothing that's happening that is outside of his will and his plan. And I know, I'm with you. Sometimes we cry out to God and say, well, then God, fix it. Watch over us, help us. And he does, probably in more ways than we know, but he doesn't protect us from everything. There's disorder, there's disruption, there's chaos, there's violence, there's injustice in this world, and it will continue until he returns. Will acts of terror happen again? I sure hope not, like you, but they probably will, and maybe even worse ones than September 11th. God forbid, and yet it probably will happen. And yet, God will still have it all in his plans. Will viruses and plagues continue to hit the world? They will. Will we have ones that baffle us, that are beyond our ability to control? Yes, just like with COVID, though by the grace of God, we have a vaccine. But God will still be with us. God will see us through, and he will see us to that place. So therefore, we will not fear. Though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, let's continue to trust our God. Let's heed his word and not be alarmed. Let's trust in him. These are the beginnings of birth pains and the greater things. The city that will never fail, the life that will never fail, that is eternal, is our destiny. Today, September 15th, we move forward from September 11th, hopefully soon from COVID-19, into the days ahead. We'll walk with God. He will walk with us, be our ever-present help. That's your good word for today. Peace.